there are men who build empires out of words. Joel Osteen is one of them. For more than 2 decades, he stood at the center of the largest church in America, week after week, with that unmistakable smile plastered across his face like a permanent fixture, like something painted on rather than felt. He told millions of people that their best life was waiting for them, that God had a plan for their prosperity, their health, their happiness. He told them to hold on, to believe, to expect good things. And millions listened. Millions gave. Millions came back the following Sunday and gave again. But empires, no matter how carefully constructed, have foundations. And when you look closely enough at the foundation beneath Joel Osteen's empire, something very troubling begins to emerge. This is not a story about theology. This is not a debate about whether the prosperity gospel is biblically sound or spiritually dangerous, though those conversations have their place. This is a story about accountability. About what happens when a man accumulates extraordinary power, extraordinary wealth, and an extraordinary public platform, and then uses all three to insulate himself from the consequences of his own choices. This is the story of how Joel Osteen's carefully constructed world is finally, irreversibly, coming apart. And this time, there is no smile wide enough to fix it. To understand where Joel Osteen stands today, you have to understand how he got there, and more importantly, how he stayed there for so long despite everything that tried to pull him down. Joel was not the obvious choice to lead Lakewood Church after his father John Osteen died in January 1999. He had spent nearly 2 decades working behind the camera, building the television ministry, staying out of the spotlight. He had declined repeated invitations to preach. He had no seminary degree, no formal theological training, and by his own admission, no burning desire to stand at a pulpit. Yet 6 days after he preached his very first sermon, his father was gone, and suddenly the enormous weight of one of America's fastest-growing congregations fell onto the shoulders of a man who had never planned to carry it. What followed was either a remarkable story of personal transformation or one of the most successful branding operations in the history of American religion, depending on who you ask. Joel found his voice, and that voice was relentlessly, almost pathologically positive. No hellfire. No warnings about judgment. No heavy theological demands. Just hope, warmth, and the steady assurance that God wanted you to prosper, that your breakthrough was coming, that you were created for greatness. The crowds responded. The television ministry exploded. The books sold in the millions. And Lakewood moved into the former Compaq Center, a 16,800-seat arena, turning what had once been a basketball venue into what critics called the ultimate temple of feel-good Christianity. For a long time, the machinery worked flawlessly. Joel had an answer for every critic, a smile for every camera, and a story of personal grace for every controversy. But cracks were always there. And once they started showing, they never really stopped. The first time most of America got a clear glimpse behind the carefully managed image was not because of Joel himself. It was because of Victoria. In December 2005, Victoria Osteen boarded a Continental Airlines flight and, according to multiple flight attendant testimonies, created a scene over a stain on her first-class armrest that resulted in the flight being delayed by more than 2 hours. The FAA fined her for interfering with a crew member. A flight attendant sued, claiming physical altercation and lasting emotional trauma. The lawsuit eventually went to trial, and a jury sided with Victoria after less than 3 hours of deliberation. Joel framed the entire episode as an unfortunate misunderstanding. He said he had encouraged his wife to pay the fine to simply move past it. But what the incident revealed was something far more significant than a dispute over a dirty armrest. It revealed a family accustomed to operating in a world without friction, a world where their comfort was expected, their requests were non-negotiable, and inconvenience was someone else's problem to solve. That attitude, projected from the front of a church onto millions of followers who were struggling to pay their bills and hold their families together, was not a minor character flaw. It was a foundational contradiction at the very heart of everything Joel Osteen preached. Then came the money questions, and they never really stopped coming. In 2005, Joel publicly announced he would no longer take his $200,000 annual salary from Lakewood. This was presented as an act of generosity, a demonstration of his commitment to the church and its congregation. What was less prominently advertised was the financial infrastructure surrounding that decision. Book advances reportedly reaching into the tens of millions. Speaking fees of around $50,000 per outside appearance. A personal net worth estimated by multiple sources at somewhere around $100 million, though as fact-checking organizations have noted, precise verification remains elusive because Lakewood, as a church, is not required to disclose its finances publicly. That lack of transparency is itself one of the most damaging elements of Joel Osteen's story. Ministry Watch, an organization that evaluates the financial accountability of Christian nonprofits, gave Lakewood Church an F for financial transparency and a donor confidence score of 3 out of 100. Reports from major publications indicated that less than 1.5% of Lakewood's annual income went toward charitable causes. Against a reported annual budget of roughly $89 million, that amounted to approximately $1.2 million directed toward actual charitable work. The rest went somewhere. But because of church tax-exempt status and the absence of required public disclosure, the congregation and the public were left largely in the dark about exactly where. Joel's answer to these questions was always some version of the same response. God had blessed him. His books had sold millions of copies. He worked hard. He gave to the church in other ways. And besides, what could possibly be wrong with success? That answer might have satisfied his most loyal followers. It satisfied almost no one else. March 2014 brought a story so strange it almost defied belief. Lakewood Church reported that approximately $600,000 had been stolen from its safe. The stolen amount included $200,000 in cash and $400,000 in checks, all from recent congregation contributions. A substantial reward was offered through Crime Stoppers. Investigations were conducted. And then, for 7 years, nothing. No arrests. No answers. The church collected on its insurance and the story seemed to fade. Then in November 2021, a plumber named Justin Colley was sent to fix a loose toilet in a public restroom at Lakewood Church. When he moved aside some insulation, approximately 500 envelopes came tumbling out of the wall. Cash, checks, and money orders. Evidence later suggested a connection to the 2014 theft. The timing meant the statute of limitations had already expired, so no criminal charges were possible. The plumber received the reward money that Lakewood had offered years earlier. Church leadership offered an explanation about the bathroom being accessible to the public and theorized that whoever hid the money there may not have been able to retrieve it. That explanation may be entirely true. What made the story so damaging was not the theft itself, which could happen to any organization, but the pattern it represented. Something significant had happened at Lakewood. The full truth was never completely established. And the institution moved forward as if resolution were the same thing as accountability. When Hurricane Harvey made landfall in August 2017 and began drowning Houston under more than 60 inches of rainfall in some areas, Joel Osteen faced the defining test of everything he claimed to represent. The city was in crisis. Tens of thousands of people were displaced. Shelters were filling up. And Lakewood Church, a 16,800-seat facility sitting on 7 acres along a major freeway, initially posted that it was inaccessible due to flooding. People drove to the church and filmed what they saw. The footage spread across social media. Critics argued the building appeared accessible. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. By Monday evening, just a day after the initial post, Joel released a statement saying the church had never actually closed its doors. By Tuesday, Lakewood opened officially as a shelter. Around 300 people took refuge there. Volunteers showed up and helped. Real assistance was provided. But timing in a crisis is everything, and the timing was wrong. While Joel Osteen was defending himself on national television, a Houston furniture store owner named Jim McIngvale, widely known as Mattress Mac, had already opened his showrooms as shelters and sent trucks out to rescue people from flooded streets. The contrast wrote itself. When Joel told a morning news audience that if they had taken in thousands of evacuees and then the building flooded, that would not have been a good story, he handed his critics exactly what they had been waiting for. He later admitted that, knowing what he knew in hindsight, he would have done things differently. But hindsight, offered from a television studio in a dry suit while the city was still underwater, was far too late to matter. The hurricane response became a symbol of something larger than a delayed shelter opening. It crystallized a critique that theologians and ordinary observers alike had been making for years. That Joel Osteen's version of Christianity was built primarily around protecting the comfort and image of Joel Osteen. That when the rubber met the road, the institution came before the people it claimed to serve. When the COVID-19 pandemic forced churches to suspend in-person services in 2020, Lakewood Church applied for and received $4.4 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds from Bank of America. It was the third largest PPP loan in the Houston area, intended to cover salaries and benefits for the church's 368 employees during the shutdown. When the Houston Chronicle reported this, the public reaction was intense. The hashtag calling for churches to be taxed began trending. Critics could not reconcile the image of one of the wealthiest religious institutions in the country accepting millions in pandemic relief money originally designed to help small businesses survive economic collapse. Church leadership defended the decision, explaining that the economic uncertainty of an indefinite shutdown made the funds necessary to protect employee livelihoods. And to its credit, Lakewood ultimately announced it would repay the full $4.4 million rather than seeking forgiveness of the loan. That decision reflected some level of responsiveness to public pressure. But the fact that the application had been made at all, and that it took a wave of public outrage to prompt the repayment announcement, said something about institutional reflex that no statement of good intention could fully walk back. Then February 2024 brought the worst day in Lakewood's history. On a Sunday afternoon between services, a woman entered the church carrying a rifle. Two off-duty law enforcement officers who were working security responded. The shooter was killed. A bystander was wounded. And the shooter's 7-year-old son, who had been brought to the church by his mother, was shot in the head. The child was rushed to the hospital. He underwent 5 brain surgeries. He lost part of his frontal lobe. Doctors removed a portion of his skull. He went into cardiac arrest multiple times. The medical team said words that no parent should ever have to hear and that no institution should ever be associated with. Sam will never be Sam again. Details that emerged afterward made the tragedy even more difficult to process. The shooter had a documented history of mental illness. She had nonetheless been able to legally purchase the weapon used in the attack just months before. The child was an innocent brought into a situation he had no part in creating. Joel Osteen addressed the press and expressed devastation, noting that things could have been worse. That may be technically accurate. It is also the kind of statement that, in the context of everything else, landed with a particular hollowness.